Seconds to count down. All right, the broadcast has started. Hey, everyone. So today, as promised, I got my interview with Rick Stewart, the candidate for the PPC in the riding of Kootenay-Columbia, British Columbia. And he's here to tell us today his position, his thoughts, and what he stands for and what he has to bring to the table as far as being a contributor to not just the People's Party of Canada, but to help put Canada on a better track and path going forward as far as or in terms of respecting our individuality, our sovereignty, and what it means to be a free human being in this country. And I'll just say that I will point out first and foremost, I already uploaded Rick's bio, and hopefully you'll check that out because as you can see, the man has some experience and some positions that he can actually speak from with actual real world experience, not just subjective or hypothetical. I'm talking a man that actually has real world experience in some areas that actually is going to play a key role in some of the party positions going forward. I just want to ask Rick, first and foremost, though, how's that weather going in BC?
Well, it's finally, we've got some really sunny days, and thanks for the introduction, Bennett. I was down on the beach yesterday and I ran into, of all people, a surgeon from the United States. And we were talking and he was telling me some of their medical advances that they've made over the last few years. And he was telling me about a patient he had where he had a severed leg and they attached it back to his body. And he said, with rehab work and follow-ups, he was out looking for work a year later. And I thought that was pretty incredible, but I told him, I said, well, that sounds pretty good. But, in Canada, we have pretty good technology too, because we took a man with no brain, no heart. We elected him as prime minister, and now the whole country's looking for work.
That's awesome.
He thought that was pretty funny. He laughed. He's been listening in the news, getting snippets from Canada, and he said, you guys have some issues up here. I thought we were bad down there, but yeah, I had a good conversation with him, that's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, there's definitely some issues that we have to undertake, and that's what we're here for, folks, is there are some people who represent, predominantly those who are in the established media. You get this kind of a elitist attitude where everything's a-okay, everything's fine. Just, keep calm and keep doing exactly what we tell you to do. Meanwhile, the rest of us in Canada realize that this is not working out so well for exactly the majority of us. Not the small minority of people, not those who get to live in, these gated communities where they don't actually have to deal with the real world predominantly. The rest of us, we're seeing what's happening out there on the political or social economic landscape. And that's what's making us more and more concerned on a daily basis, and why People's Party of Canada has now shown that liberty is definitely rising. They're these elitists in the media or who represent the established parties, they can't keep it on the back burner any longer. And yes, the time is now that Canadians are stepping up the plate and showing their willingness to actually start openly and vocalizing about the actual social economic issues that we really have to get down into the nitty-gritty, dirty weeds with and start figuring this stuff out. Basically, just like what would happen in your own personal family situation, is you have to sit down and you have to discuss these things as adults, and that's the only way you're going to work through them and try to find out some kind of resolve them, and it means that you'll be able to go on forward and live as individuals, as sovereign people, and do your thing while respecting other people's sovereignty and their liberty as well. And that's what has to happen. That's what the PPC is doing today. And that's what Maxime Bernier, under his leadership, is putting forth at the moment, which is why I'm very happy, and why Rick, I'm sure, is happy to now be a voice and a representative of the PPC. I just want to ask you the first question, though, Rick, based on your bio, which, like I said, already uploaded to this video, and I'm sure people are appreciative already that what you've brought to the table. But we just want to ask, and I want to know, how was growing up in Caslo, and what made you join the military and then go into forestry? What took you from that place to that place?
Well, I came to Caslo at the age of 13 from Alberta. And at that time, I was already working summers on ranches in Alberta, pushing cows around. We had our own horses in Alberta, did a lot of riding as a young person. And, we had a lot of fun doing that, but a lot of ranching is hard work too, fixing fences and, you know, getting the hay up. And but it was a good place to grow up. But when we came out to British Columbia, to Caslow, I mean, it was such a foreign environment to me. It was like mountains and trees and lakes and rivers. It was beautiful. It smelled different. And I tell you, I the first few years when I got out here, I was exploring like crazy, you know, hiking around the hills and swimming and fishing. And, you know, it was just a lot of fun. And it was too much fun, actually, because in grade 11, I missed 55 days of school playing hooky. I was never sick. I would be walking to school and I would stop and I'd look at the school and then I'd turn my head and look at the lake, look back at the school, look at the lake. And then the bell would go off for classes and I would go, well, I'm late. No point going now. I better go down. I'll do some fishing today. I'll go tomorrow. So I failed grade 11 because of that. 55 days, pretty tough to overlook. So I left Caslow, I left home and I started to strike out on my own. And I fell across a recruitment office for the Canadian Armed Forces. And I checked into it, did my tests. And I was accepted into the Canadian Armed Forces at the age of 17. And I was about 150 pounds, I think, at the time, still growing. And we went to boot camp in Nova Scotia and did that. And in Cornwallis, I was taking training to operate heavy equipment. And I turned 18 years old in Borden. And I ended up that night in the junior ranks mess with a bunch of fellas. And they were bound and determined to get me drunk, which they succeeded at. I got back to the barracks. We were on base in Borden. I got back to the barracks, passed out on my bed. There was 4 beds in a room. And anyways, when I woke up, I had gotten sick on my bed. And we had a base commander inspection the next morning, that morning. So I took all my bedding and I run down and I threw it all in the wash machine to clean it. Pillowcase, sheets, a red woolen fire blanket, threw it all in. Well, when the wash cycle finished, all my sheets and my pillowcase had turned pink from the red fire blanket. And when I run the stuff through the dryer and brought it back to my bed, I tried to make my bed for the inspection, and my fire blanket was about the size of a postage stamp and all wrinkly, and I was trying to stretch it to fit over the bed properly. And I had these flaming pink sheets and pillowcase, and I was still drunk, like hungover really bad at the time. And standing at attention, the base commander's walking through the barracks, and yeah, you guessed it, he comes right into our room and he looks at my bed, looks at me, he looks at my bed, and my sergeant standing behind the base commander, staring daggers at me. And he mouthed the words, I'm pretty sure he said, "You are going to die." That was the words he silently mouthed behind the base commander. And the base commander asked me, "Are those sheets issue, soldier?" And I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "I'm going to have to talk to the quartermaster about that." And he turned and he walked out of the room. And everybody in the room was trying not to laugh except me. I was just terrified. I thought, oh boy, this is going to be, I'll be up on charge. Anyways, it all blew over and things were fine. But so in the military, I had a lot of fun. I did a lot of growing up. I had to change out of my uniform a few times as I was growing physically. I went to Montreal in 1976 as part of the Olympic security and communications team. And that was a good 7-month posting. But eventually I left the military, I got out, Bennett, and I went back and finished my high school. And I applied to join the Calgary City Police. I thought that'd be pretty good. And I got accepted for an interview. I passed a few initial things. And they scheduled an interview for 9 o'clock in the morning downtown Calgary. So I'm heading down there. The traffic is just to the walls. I knew I was going to be late, so I pulled over to a payphone to phone them and tell them that I was going to be late for the interview. And the words that came out of my mouth were, thanks for your time, but I've changed my mind. And I went back to my apartment. I cleaned all my stuff out that I could, put it in my car, and I went back to BC. I couldn't take that city life, and it just didn't do it for me. So I ended up logging in Caslow. I worked for a logger named Bill Seafoot up the Duncan Valley, and Bill's really well known and respected around the community of Caslow. He was a World War II vet. He had a heart of gold, but he was a tough nut at the same time, and always insisted we get our 12, 13 loads of wood out every day. And we did it. Sometimes on a Friday, we'd slip away a little bit early, head out to the Legion and have a few refreshments, but it was good. And then I got offered a job up in Mica Creek running fire crews and tree planting crews. So I did that for a couple of years up in Mica Creek, and I went to Selkirk College in Castlegar, which is a local college here, and took forestry, a 2-year diploma program. And then I went up to Golden, and I worked for the Forest Service up there, and went to University of Alberta and got my degree in forestry. And I went to work with the Ministry of Forests as a forest health officer for the Nelson Forest region. I did a few other things for the ministry before that, but I did that. And then I went with the Forest Practices Board for a few years as an audit practices manager. And then I left forestry and government altogether, and I went out on my own. I incorporated, and I did environmental contracting work in the oil and gas industry. And the oil and gas, Bennett, was in full swing at the time, and I never looked back. So I was away from home a lot, traveling to do my work. But I can tell you one thing about oil and gas, which is pretty interesting, is a lot of people see the sort of dirty side of it. But if you...
Hey, actually, Rick, before you continue on the oil and gas, definitely keep that on the back burner, because I definitely want to hear what you got to say. But I will point out right now, even the fact that you have this history in forestry, and the fact that you were even in the tree planting portion of that, and the importance of that. Actually, it's great that you have that kind of historical background as far as your occupation, because that's something actually I seen and I shared earlier this week. Yeah, it was earlier this week. And actually a whole new study is coming out where, we don't have to tax people into poverty. Actually, if you just plant, and this is why scientists and people are greatly concerned about environmentalism, is, hey, if you could plant 1 trillion trees, not just in Canada, obviously, but I mean globally, that would have a profound effect in actually cleaning up our environment and atmosphere, and actually putting us on a better path as far as, having cleaner air, and being more conducive, rather than robbing and plundering the taxpayer base in these schemes that we see. So thank you for actually bringing that to the table, because you even said that you have a history of even doing tree planting. And as someone like even myself, I'll just say in my own personal subjective experience on the East Coast, even some of these big corporations such as Irving's know darn well if they want to have their capitalist ventures continue forward in the future, well, it's very important for them to do the right thing now, which is that when they go into the forest to take down the trees that we use, to build our homes, or for many other areas that we do need to use them as consumers, but they also understand the importance of replanting the trees so that there is something to not just protect as far as the environment, but those are resources that future Canadians will be able to use as well. So that's a great initiative as far as I'm concerned. And once again, that means that you're bringing something to the table that, actually is very important, especially where you live in British Columbia, because as we know, not just the East Coast as far as New Brunswick, but the British Columbia forestry and lumber industry is basically just as vital. So the East and the West Coast both have a very key and vital role to play as far as, helping the environment, but at the same time, helping sustain the free market and create more jobs and opportunities for Canadians.
Oh, absolutely. Well, trees are the best storage of carbon. If we can sequester CO2 into our green stock, our trees that are growing, and there's lots of opportunity, even on boulevards and areas where the regeneration of the old forest wasn't quite up to snuff. For us to go in and plant and rehabilitate these areas is a great plus. If capturing carbon is your game, that's one of the most cost-effective ways to do it. And there's a lot of other spin-offs in terms of habitat, environmental stability when you put in trees. So yeah, it's a plus game.
Well said, Rick. And as you were going to say, as far as the oil and gas industry, continue on.
Well, I was just going to say, a lot of us visualize, the roughnecks up on the rig, spinning pipe and running in and out of the hole, and they're covered in drilling fluids. And yeah, sure, that's part of the game. But the oil and gas industry is one of the most technologically advanced industries in this country. And what you don't see with a lot of these rigs are the geologists, the engineers, the supervision, the safety, the construction, the environmental program that all takes place running in the background to keep that single rig operating within the environmental regulations. And I did environmental contracting work for all the major gas and oil players in Western Canada over a 15-year span in 4 provinces. And I can tell you that our oil and gas industry is second to none when it comes to environmental stewardship. In fact, I'll even say that oil and gas in this country, because of hyper legislation, is actually, we sometimes do things that from a greenhouse gas point of view, we're actually spending money where we don't really have to. But you have to play within the bounds and the rules set out, and that's fine. But I can assure anybody who wants to discuss it that our oil and gas industry is second to none, and our technology in terms of handling waste and the environment, protecting it, those services are in demand in Australia, the United States, and other countries in the world. And the company that I worked for actually provided those services overseas.
Well said, Rick. That's one area where I think Canadians are woefully ill-informed. There are people that I'm familiar with, such as Tim Moen, a leader from the Libertarian Party of Canada, that is out of Fort McMurray himself, and actually did a documentary. And some of those positive aspects that you say that contribute to that's the unseen aspect that Canadians are never inundated with, as far as the proponents of our establishment state media corporations, such as the CBC, is. Yeah, they get lots of these environmentalist documentaries that say all the bad things that happen as a result or a consequence.
We're fighting, Bennett, foreign entities that are foreign funding into radical environmental groups that their sole purpose is to destroy our oil and gas. And as a People's Party candidate, I am firmly behind Maxime Bernier when he says that we will push back on that, because we have a story to tell here in Canada, and it's one I'm proud of. And I made my living 15 years working in the oil patch, and nobody's going to tell me that what we're doing is destroying the environment. I mean, sure, we make a little disturbance on the environment, but even when you look at the broader history, because we as humans tend to look at the natural order in terms of a human lifespan, which is really insignificant, 80 years, whatever. Just 10,000 years ago up in Fort McMurray, they were still under a mile thick ice sheet. And, that ice melted, and those forests just came about in the last 10,000 years up there. And, the pyramids were built, 5,000 years ago, it was the Egyptians. And, as the climate warmed and those ice sheets retreated, the forest reclaimed naturally those areas. And that's what will happen even if we go out and we don't quite get it quite right and the forest looks a little bit different. You give it a couple, 300 years, a couple of forest fires and regrowth, successional events in the forest, and you won't see any sign. It's all gone.
Yeah. Well, that was basically what I was alluding to, is the fact that, yes, we need more proponents and more advocates of energy extraction and resource in this country to better present and represent what that means and what that entails, as you were alluding to earlier, the fact that there's a lot of, like you say, people that are these geologists or people that are environmentally conscious that do that hard work and put in that effort to make sure that even these corporations that are undergoing these kind of extraction processes are doing so in a safe and environmentally conscious manner. And you know what? It's not even the fact that the geologists or some of these proponents of environmentalism are doing so. As a business owner, if you want to create a sustainable aspect as far as energy extraction and resource extraction, it's the onus is on you to make sure you're doing that. It's in these companies, it's even in their best interest to do the best practices going forward. So I believe the market can best dictate how that should happen. And that's not a matter of, actually, I use the wrong terminology, because there is no dictate when you talk about the market. It's what's most reflective as far as what human needs as far as consumption. And now a lot of people that are environmentalists, they're against, or they rail against oil and gas extraction. But most of them, as you probably know, speak out of both sides of their mouth simultaneously. Because at the same time, the only people that I would take fully and respect 100% is if you're walking around naked in the woods. And I'll say, yes, evil, yeah, you can call people that extract resources evil in some way, or say that's bad because you actually have a leg to stand on. For the rest of the Canadians, or these environmentalists, or these far leftists, they're actually, like I say, they're hypocrites, because every one of us, and we all know and understand that we need the extraction of energy and resources to sustain our modern way of how we live. Nobody is suggesting, I've never even heard any of these leftists ever suggest we want to go back to, the hunter-gatherer days, right? So no, we have to figure out best practices and best methods going forward. Once again, that's where the market takes center stage, as far as I'm concerned.
And two things there too, Bennett, is number one is that oil and gas, the energy it provides in the forms in which we can use it to do big agriculture, has lifted so many people out of starvation and poverty. We feed billions of people. We're 7.7 billion people on the planet right now. And, not everybody, we probably have we do have some problems with the equitable distribution of those foods, but we've made great strides in terms of the number of people living in, near starvation over the years. And we can do more, and we will do more, but that's due to oil and gas, and that cannot be forgotten. And the second thing is that oil and gas environmental stewardship around the world is tied directly to the prosperity of the country. The lower the prosperity, third world countries in particular have bad environmental track records, and nearly without exception. And those Western civilizations with a high level of prosperity, like Canada and the United States, I'm not saying we're perfect, but we're pretty damn good. And we take care of our environment. I mean, all you have to do is go down to Mexico, and it's a beautiful country, and I like the people and their culture, but they really do have to pick up on their garbage. They dump it off the sides of the roads, and it's terrible. I see these countries, Dominican Republic and others like it, where people dump. They don't have proper sanitation facilities, and it shows. And,
yeah. Well, that's basically the importance of private property and ownership, right? People are much more prone to take care of their backyard when they feel that they have actual stake or a claim, right? That's a big thing with those of us in Canada, U.S.
Which ties directly to the wealth of a nation also, is their recognition of private property and their ability to uphold the laws to protect those property rights. And where governments fail to do that, this pretty much always results in despair, a lack of hope.
Anyways, we did get a little bit there, Rick. Sorry that we got, but I actually really appreciate you actually covering this whole oil and gas thing, because that was actually the question that I was leading up to. Anyways, we can expand actually before I actually go on to the next one. Actually, maybe I just want to get you to expand on this, because I think people like I say, I'm not trying to appeal, and when I do my interviews, I'm not trying to appeal to any particular side as far as politics is. This is just about being common sense and using reason, logic, and scientific evidence-based theories or understanding of the real world that surrounds us as far as what we deal with our social or economic environment. And as you're saying, oil and gas is an important aspect and area of our economic development, which plays a key and pivotal role in our social development and programs as well. But in addition to that, I'm sure you would agree, and I'm not going to try to put words in your mouth, so I'm just going to leave you to go with this. But in addition to oil and gas, which I'm a big fan and supporter of, but also as Canadians, as PPC members or supporters or candidates such as yourself, I'm sure you have no problem or you don't take any issue with people that would be considered on the green side of things, or these environmentalists that want to use alternative sources of energy. As long as it's done through voluntary means, and if they can find a market for it, I'm all for it. What say you, Rick?
Well, I say a good idea is a good idea, regardless of its source. And, even Elizabeth May with the Green Party, she's come up with a few things that are good. I can't agree with their overall platform. I don't want to live without oil and gas. We got a long, cold winter in Canada, and that's not going to change anytime soon. I know where my heat comes from. I mean, I do heat with wood here, but oil and gas, like I said earlier, it grows a lot of food. And
hey, that would gut your house somehow.
Yeah. But so anyways, one of the things that Elizabeth May said, and others too, to give them credit, is that, sending raw bitumen offshore in tankers is something that they won't support. And you know what? I agree with them. I am for the export of oil and gas, don't get me wrong, but raw bitumen, there's a huge risk there. And I'm just going to describe that risk real quick, because even the proponents of that maybe don't understand, but all risk is a combination of probability and consequence. And if raw bitumen, no matter how good of standards we have in place, if it ever does spill, would be an environmental disaster on the West Coast. Raw bitumen is tough to clean up. It floats, it breaks apart, it sinks, it does everything, and it would be destructive in there for a lot of years. So we need to upgrade and these bitumen products that we're getting from the oil sands, not tar sands, oil sands, and make sure that the products that we export present as little risk as possible to the environment while providing the greatest amount of jobs and opportunity to Canadians to get it into that form. So
well, yeah. No, I was just going to say, well said, Rick. And actually, that's perfect, because yes, that's value added as far as keeping jobs and occupation in this country, where we can actually, like you say, rather than shipping that somewhere else offshore. And there have been Canadian engineers and geniuses that have already come up and conjured up ideas. I'm sure you've probably heard of the bitumen puck, right?
Yeah.
Where you can actually, you can do these kind of value added services in Canada, in-house, where we can make these products much more safer. So I agree with you 100% there, Rick. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't really have too much to add to that, but building a few upgraders and refineries, somehow our entire market on oil and gas to our domestic market is the most botched up, screwed up, packed together. It's heinous what's going on out there. It's beyond belief that we export our raw crude down south, have it refined and shipped back to us as gasoline. We're bringing in oil and gas from Algeria and Saudi Arabia up the St. Lawrence Seaway. We have a prime minister fixated on protecting a small, shutting us down on the West Coast, but yet he's running through schools of beluga whales, hauling this stuff up through the St. Lawrence Seaway. I don't get it. Well, I do get it, actually, and I can talk about that later. But I
don't know if you've noticed, Rick, but I've become a bobblehead just since you started talking about this thing, going like this constantly, because I agree. It resonates so much with me, like you say, why we have this patchwork of how we get our energy and resource in this country. Well, it's because of special interest groups, right, and a lot of political posturing, and not even taking into account the fact that, as you suggested, Canada, we have a plenty. And not that I'm against trade. I'm all for trade. I'm all for, you know, bartering or doing all whatever we have to get energy to the people in Canada. But yes, Energy East, my goodness, Energy East would play a huge, profound effect with getting not just a lot of Canadian people, actually off their butts and actually being productive members of society of this country. But yes, we wouldn't have to rely on Algeria or Saudi Arabia. And not that I'm, like I say, once again, I'm not against, like, well, the regimes I might take issue with, but, you know, the particular resources, I'm all for resource and trade. But once again, yeah, Canada, we are in a strange position where we have, you know, one of the largest reserves on the planet, but yet we don't take full advantage of it.
Yeah, we have 200 years worth at the current rate of extraction or more. I mean, that's just the proven resources that are out there. You know, the first things, you know, as a People's Party candidate, our party has made in its platform a few priorities. And the first one is to get rid of carbon tax. We're going to stop that silliness right now. And we're also going to recall C-48, and which is, you know, the closure of the coast, and C-49, which 69, sorry, which is doing these extensive evaluations of environmental impacts, and you know, and getting anybody's lip out over building a pipeline, and these silly requirements like looking at the intersection of sex and gender, or sex, gender, and
gender-based analysis. What a foolish freaking proposition.
Yeah, like it's just beyond. But I know what the purpose of that kind of legislation is, and we're going to stop it. But the purpose of that is to absolutely shut down our oil exporting chances and getting our product to saltwater. But those days are numbered. If Canadians grasp the magnitude of what's going on in our country right now, and look at PPC seriously in this next election, we can bring our industry back to work for us, protect the environment, and we can accomplish a lot. But there has to be unity in the voters, the electorate out there, and I hope that comes about. You know,
I do as well, Rick, and I really appreciate your efforts and the efforts of other PPC members and candidates to make this conversation an important one, and something that Canadians feel that they actually have skin in the game regards. But just to move a little bit past the oil and gas, because I think we covered that fairly extensively, but something else in regards to your history and your background, because we are now talking about PPC and the fact that you are a candidate in your riding of Kootenay-Columbia. But I had another question. Is you said you were a political orphan. Can you describe your journey as a nominee for the Conservative Party to being a candidate for the PPC?
Yeah, that was a bit of a journey. It had its ups and downs. But in a nutshell, Bennett, I retired in 2014 when oil and gas prices fell. I had just finished paying off all the renovations and work I did on the house, and I got it to where I needed it for retirement, pretty close.
Good timing, by the way, Rick.
Yeah, very good timing. And I actually had no debt or anything, so I didn't have the savings I wanted for retirement, but I do have a couple of rental suites I built over the years downstairs. So between those and the government pension and, you know, whatnot, I could make a go of it. So I retired. And one of the things on my bucket list was to do a trip to Australia. So my partner and I, we went over to Australia. We spent 6 months. We bought a van and we drove around the country, and we had a hell of a good time. And I'll tell you, if anybody ever wants to go on a good trip, Australia, the people are fantastic there. And the scenery and the diversity of their country is great. There's a lot of nothing in some places, and it gets awfully hot in the Northern Territories, but the beauty is quite something there. So anyways, when we came back from this, and this was the winter of 2015-16, I missed the federal election, but But young Trudeau there, he got elected, and he was sitting as prime minister, and I started to see right away that where he was going with his so-called reign over us. And boy, I'll tell you, I can't even, and I'm not the only one, I can't even look at him on TV anymore. He just, that man disgusts me. I've lost all respect for him. And, you know, back at the time, I thought, oh, great. Well, Stephen Harper, you know, he was a pretty good guy, but he didn't really, you know, lift my skirt. He kind of plodded along. He was very diplomatic and nice, but we needed a change. Trudeau was young. I thought, well, let's give Trudeau, young Trudeau, he's got to have a handle on it. He'll have some new ideas and that. Well, his ideas that he's implemented since he got elected are not new ideas, they're old ones. In fact, his ideas go right back to about 1847 when Karl Marx was doing up his little documents, but enough said there. So I thought, okay, I've got to stand against Trudeau's ambition here and agenda. So I joined the Conservative Party, redid my membership with them, stepped forward, worked with the board. I was the head of the policy committee, and my top two policies that I proposed at the provincial policy session for the Conservatives in 2017 were equalization had to be redone as a program, and that we needed a national energy strategy to get our pipelines built and sort the mess out that we have in our oil and gas industry right now, and bring prosperity to Canadians, make the system fair, et cetera, et cetera. And while I was at the policy meeting over in Vernon, one of the provincial policy meetings, our provincial rep with the Conservative Party came up to me, and I won't name drop here, but he said to me, he said, wow, we found a star candidate for the Kootenay-Columbia. He didn't realize that I was one of the nominees running for the candidacy of the Kootenay-Columbia. And I said, oh, is that right? Pretty interesting. And of course, right away, as soon as the meeting was over, I called over just to confirm what was going on. And it was confirmed that the party, Conservative Party down east, had directly selected a star candidate. They put our entire candidate selection process on hold. There was 4 of us in the race already as fully registered nominees accepted by the party. And the candidate selection was supposed to go off within just a couple of months at our AGM. And the whole thing was delayed. There was gross interference from the party. And excuse me, around that time, Scheer got in as leader of the Conservative Party also. And the first thing he does is whip his caucus into supporting the Paris Climate Accord. And, you know, that threw me back. Like, that's not a conservative value, sending billions of dollars overseas to fight climate change in other countries. It's just ludicrous. I could see the great shakedown of Canada at that time. And it is a shakedown. And this shakedown continues to this day. It's happening in Canada. But anyways, so I really questioned Scheer's ability, and right after the AGM, and our president and our secretary resigned, 2 individuals I really respected with the Conservative Party. They resigned and quit, and I could see everything, the rank and file membership lining up behind the star candidate, and I just dropped out. I saw that lack of integrity in Andrew Scheer. He was not principled. He's a professional politician, and he's out to get power and the vote and power. That's all he cares about. That's everything he does is directed towards moving more and more over towards the center and even center left to get as many votes as he can collect as possible. So I left the Conservative Party. I said, enough is enough. And I was an orphan. And I thought, to hell with it, I'm going to go and I'm going to do the things I like to do. I'm going to do some more river tripping in my canoe, take the dogs climbing, and I had all these plans. And less than a month after I left the party, I was hiking and I broke my leg. It was a bad break last year. Some people helped me off the mountain. So not something I want to go through again. It's a character builder. But anyways, so I spent last summer in a wheelchair and on crutches, hanging around, watching the good weather slip by. And then at the end of August, I was watching the news, and there's Maxime Bernier stepping out, announcing that he left the morally and intellectually corrupt party, the Conservative Party of Canada, to start his new party based on personal responsibility, individual freedom, fairness, and respect. And I liked Maxime Bernier all along. And I'll tell you, I'm far from being a culturalist or a racist. I don't care if Maxime was French or if he spoke Swahili. That man makes a lot of sense. And I just about broke my leg, Bennett, reaching for my computer to look up more information and send him some money to support his cause. And I jumped right in with the PPC with both feet. Because looking back during my orphanage period that summer, nursing a broken leg, I could see exactly what Trudeau's doing. And what he's doing is right out of the Karl Marx playbook of how to subvert a country and implement globalism or socialism. And that's what's going on nowadays. We have these political, he's letting into our country radicalism. He encourages degenerative behaviors from all these different people. There's attacks on the family. Freedom of religion only applies unless you're a Christian, then you're under attack. We're supposed to be able to freely express our beliefs and have, hold these to ourselves, but also speak them publicly.
Yeah. Well, Maxime is definitely a man that publicly displays his courage of his conviction. And that, just like you, that was one of the main reasons, one of the main focal points and why I said, yeah, this is someone I got to get behind politically, because that's the thing. What all we see today predominantly is these leftists, these authoritarian collectivists. These people actually have just as much courage and conviction behind their steadfast principles as far as, indentured servitude or basically modern day slavery. And they're getting a lot of traction from that, because the people that are proponents or advocates of that realize that their leaders are very staunch in their convictions and willing to vocalize that openly. Whereas people that are advocates of genuine freedom and liberty in Canada, it's like it's a barren landscape, basically, almost, especially in that big sphere, like the media actually pays attention to, until Maxime stepped onto the stage. And I agree with you 100% there. That was that one first breath of fresh air that I ever actually undertook, where I wasn't just going to like people in fringe parties in Canada or people that have no voice, basically, and the media doesn't pay any attention to. Maxime was that first person that, like you say, stepped out there on that the big stage and said, you know what? I'm not going to bow or yield to this political correctness. I'm not going to play these stupid political games. I'm going to stand firm behind my convictions. And there's not a damn thing anybody's going to say to stop me. And I was like, oh, man, okay, I love this guy. And that is what has emboldened my support and why I continue to this day to be not just ambitious, but excited about what he brings to the table on the political landscape in this country. And I'm sure you feel the same way.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think back to old Bill, Seafoot, the guy I used to log with, if he was around today, he'd be swearing and cussing up a streak. He would not tolerate that kind of stuff. And, these guys that run across the beaches in the European landscape shooting in World War II, they weren't the kind of guys to roll over and take this kind of stuff lightly. And I learned from them. And, there is a time to stand up. And I don't like being lectured, especially about Canadian values. I'm as much Canadian as anybody else out there. And I don't care where they're from. If I was a representative for the Kootenay-Columbia, you can send me to Ottawa, but in here, inside me, is always going to be the Kootenay-Columbia and the values I learned with the people that I grew up with, who mentored me, trained me, the people I was in the military with and working in the cold north on the rigs. And I am Canadian, and I know what made this country. And for some son of a bitch to come up and say we don't have a culture and sets out to destroy our country and attacks, I'm not a particularly religious person, Bennett, but there's those 10 commandments, and yeah, sure, we need to upgrade them maybe a little bit to fit today's, modernize them, but there's some basic things in there that are about respecting other people and their rights. And all of these lefties that are out there protesting their rights, so-called rights, forget that the rest of us also have rights. And if they want to, abandon oil and gas and live in a cave or build a yurt out in the bush and live there, I say, fine. My hat's off to them. If you want to buy an electric car, it's fine. That's great. But I don't think I should have to subsidize your electric car. There's too much demand on us regular working folks in taxation alone without having to give up our values and our culture to accommodate others. And I'm just about done with it. And that's why I'm stepping up for the People's Party. And Max is the only guy I will support.
Right on. Well said, Rick. And, I'm so agree with that. And this is where, like I said, no matter where you reside on that political spectrum or either side of that aisle, this is the part that I find most important to present to the people is those of us who are proponents of freedom of individual liberty and the positions or the principles that the PPC party stands for. We're saying, listen, if you're a socialist or a communist, or hey, if you want to have some kind of collective endeavor, that's a beautiful aspect. And that's where you show that the proof is in the pudding. Is an advocate of liberty says, hey, if you want to set up some kind of commune or socialist endeavor somewhere where you don't get to force that on other people, you go ahead and do so.
Yeah.
The proponents of liberty say you have the freedom to do so. That is not my position to tell you how you to live. I'm saying if you want to live in a socialist endeavor or you want to create your own little commune, you go ahead and do so. The only thing that I require, the only thing that I demand is that you don't have any kind of pretense of forced subjugation where I have to be forced to participate in your collective endeavor, which is why people that are promoters of individual liberty, such as Maxime, and what he stands for as far as post-Enlightenment era values, is let's just respect each other's sovereignty and their individuality. That's how we live under the banner of unity. Is just imagine even if you were living in your community or your neighborhood, if you went around telling everybody in your neighborhood how they have to live, well, that's not a sense of unity. People are going to resent you. People are not going to like you. But how you create a nice, seamless environment of people with lots of different perspectives and different opinions or preferences is say, you do you and I do me. The only demand that I have is that you respect me and I respect you. And if there's any point where you overcross or you step over that line or that boundary, then we'll have to find some way to resolve that some ways in some legal dispute, right? Other than that, I want to allow you to live the way you want to do. You do you and I'll do me. And that's what I love about the People's Party Canada and why I don't understand why. And I think, well, I do understand. The reason why more and more Canadians are on board and adopting this is because the media is completely misrepresenting what the PPC actually represents. Trying to paint people, right? Go ahead, Rick. Go ahead, man.
Oh, they're gonna turn this election into a bit of a sham. There's so much collusion and bias in the media right now. I mean, you can't give a news outfit like CBC over $1 billion of government, of taxpayer money. Government doesn't have any money. Let's
not upset.
First and foremost, very clear. And I keep that very clear in my mind. The government has nothing to give us, not a goddamn thing. The only thing that when it comes to monetary, to dollars, is that comes from the taxpayer, period. The only thing the government can give us is good governance, protection of our sovereignty, upholding our Constitution, and protecting our rights and freedoms. And you know what? That's not happening right now. So to get back to the media collusion, the government is not stepping out to prove that there is no collusion. We've got an election coming up in a few months, and this is how these types of ideology get into power around the world. and every time that happens, it's been a disastrous failure. And, you know, you can list the countries: Cuba, Venezuela, Chile, Argentina, China, Russia, North Korea. China is in there right now, and they're having their hands full. You know, people will start to push back after a little while. But our government is showing zero accountability and responsibility for what's going on. They won't even acknowledge it, just like they won't acknowledge the People's Party of Canada party. So this is no longer a matter of right and left on a political spectrum, Bennett. We also have to look at being authoritarianism or libertarian.
Exactly, yeah.
So who wants to live under an authority? I don't. And that's the problem with these ideologies, is that once people start to resist, they have to double down. So they control all media. They subject you through thought police, people that will actually rat you out if you don't share their ideological or party line. And, you know, I witnessed that firsthand. And some people out there are going to go, oh, what the hell is he talking about? But in 1983, I was on a student exchange program to Finland. And I worked for a Finnish company called Puulaki Oy. And Finnish is an interesting language. But anyways, but while I was there was a 1 week break I had, and I actually got a visa to go behind the Iron Curtain to St. Petersburg. And it was called Leningrad at the time. And it was about 50 miles, I think, from Helsinki or whatever. But anyways, we jumped on a bus and we went there. And we were pretty, we were always in a group. This is behind the Iron Curtain. East-West Germany were still divided. You know, even when we worked close to the Russian border, there was a 2 mile sort of buffer zone where we had to have special badges to do forestry work. And the Russian soldiers would be patrolling the border to not to keep us out. It was to keep their people in. And there's a big difference there. And anyways, I went to Leningrad, and it's very, very dystopian. And I left the tour group leader. I snuck out of the hotel. I sold all my blue jeans, my work blue jeans, on the black market there, because people couldn't get blue jeans, and they were in high demand. And I was told about this before I even went. Take some blue jeans, you can sell them. So I got all these rubles, which were worth nothing outside of Russia. You couldn't even take them to a bank and exchange them in Western countries. So I just had these rubles, and I kind of gave some away, and I spent some. I met this guy from Amsterdam. We went out to this restaurant there in Leningrad, and we ran into more people, and we just kind of started partying with them and drinking vodka. And I met some really nice people over there. And, you know, I won't get into too much more detail on that, Bennett, but overall it was gray and drab, just like it's portrayed in the movies. It was no different. The apartments these people lived in were just horrid. Just bland concrete structures, very blocky and falling apart. The worst standards of workmanship I've ever seen when it comes to plumbing and electrical. Like, even structurally, they were questionable. Yeah. And you go to the shops, there was no consumer goods there. In one shop, they'd have hats, one or two styles of hats. You go to another shop, and they had a type of shoe or two. And some shops were empty, and some had toothpaste, but no toothbrushes, right? So very sporadic, the consumer goods that came in. People would put on their walls pictures or pages torn out of an Eaton's or a Simpson Sears catalog of consumer goods, like washing machines, women's dresses, and they would put them on their apartments as decoration. Somehow they got these catalogs over there showing, you know, American, Canadian goods. And it was sad, really sad. And, you know, only somebody that's swaddled in the comforts of a free market system and a democracy like Canada could possibly espouse socialism or communism. They don't know how bad it is. And they refuse to look at the track record of it and to really drill down and get themselves familiar with, you know, all the basic pros and cons of it. And it's sad. And I don't know these schools of ours nowadays. My God.
Oh, I hear you, man. And what you said actually was perfect as far as authoritarianism versus libertarian is a perfect segue into my actual next question I had to you. And for those of you that are watching here, I just want to point out first and foremost, because clarity of language gives clarity of mind and clarity of thought. So when we're talking about authoritarians versus libertarians, a libertarian, as you must understand, if you understand the philosophical principles that define a libertarian, there are three basic tenets of what it is to be a libertarian. Number one, self-ownership. I own me. Nobody owns me. I'm not a slave. I'm not a subject. I'm not a serf to anyone. I am a sovereign individual. I am a human being. Number two is, by natural extension of my self-ownership, anything that I produce through my intellect or through my labor, by natural extension, by the fact that I did that through my resources, whether it's my intellect or my labor, my physical capacity, is anything I produce as a result of that is mine by natural extension. And in addition to that, if you add that third aspect, that third tenet of libertarianism, which is the non-aggression principle, which is do not use preemptive force, violence, coercion, or theft towards other human beings. Well, if by natural extension what I produce or provide through my intellect or through the fruits of my labor are mine, nobody has any claim or no authority to claim any portion, whether it's 10%, 20%, 50%, or 100% of that. Nobody has any legal claim to anything that I provide through my intellect or my labor. So that's all it means. That's all libertarians truly stand for, is the non-aggression principle, self-ownership, and property rights. And who among us do not hold those very ideals and principles near and dear to their heart? Even people that would be proponents of socialism lock their bikes up if they're going in the store, or they don't want people taking arbitrarily things that they work to provide for themselves. So like I say, even people that are have been tricked or indoctrinated into some of these false ideologies that suggest that this blind altruism, where you just allow other people to dictate how you should be ruled. No, even once you've even questioned someone in the personal or in the individual realm, they would even accept and adopt that, yeah, actually, I am a firm and staunch proponent of individual rights, freedom, and liberty. Matter of fact, I'm all about negating any pretense of slavery or forced subjugation. So that's what, at the end of the day, and I want you to continue on and tell me your side of this, is who in the hell would ever argue against not being a subject, servant, or slave?
You know, it's pretty funny when, I get around talking to lots of people in different communities, and I would say that when it comes to people that sort of get it, obviously some of the older Canadians like myself, mature working people who've raised a family and gone through it, pretty much all of us recognize the problems we're having in Canada right now with this current government. It's not, but some of the millennials are just not getting it, and it's a real shame. But I do get it from the point of view is that, when you're young, you got your youth, you're making money, you've got a family to raise, a house to take care of if you're that fortunate. But they need to pay a little bit more attention to where this country's going. But what really gives me hope, Bennett, and I see this and I like it every time it happens, is a young person comes up to me and he's totally woke. He understands exactly what's going on in government. Some of them are really sharp, and they support the PPC, and they grew up on social media, so they're not subject to the CBC global television version of the news. They get their news online, and they have a different slant and way of looking at things, and a lot of them have their eyes wide open. That gives me a lot of hope, and I know that those younger folks, they're the ones that should be really concerned about what's going on, and they should be totally listening to what we're talking about here, because they're the ones that are going to have to live with whatever happens. I'm not going to be around for, my best before date happened a decade or two ago. I'm well past that now at 62. But I think
you're doing darn good. If I'm doing as good as you are at 62, man, I'll be a happy camper.
Well, it's getting hard for me to go up and down steps nowadays. I can't run up and down steps anymore. You know, I used to be able to do it 2-3 steps at a time. I can't now. I have to hang on to a railing. My knees, I've had so many operations in my ankles. But like I said, my brain's sharp, and I'll fight. I'm not going to roll over and continue to watch this shakedown of our country, Bennett. And thank God Maxime Bernier came along. He's, you know, he puts these other he makes them look pretty goddamn silly, actually. He's so principled and smart and intelligent, and he's got no hidden agenda except he just wants to maintain our prosperity and freedoms in a nutshell. He wants people to be happy. I really believe that people just want a government they can trust to work in their best interests, spend the money wisely, and stay the hell out of their business. That's what I believe.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be such a nice thing?
Oh, I yearn for those days, Rick. I yearn for those days. And like you were saying, the beautiful thing that people will learn about Maxime, and that's the thing, folks, we live in the age of information. So there's no longer excuse. Ignorance is a choice these days. If you don't believe what Maxime stands for, if you think he's just politically posturing, all you got to do is look back, and I can find it. Matter of fact, I might share a couple of them in the links of this description of this video, where you can show Maxime saying the same things, standing firm on his convictions and his principles, even from 10 years ago. I found videos 8-9 years ago with the man espousing the exact same thing that he's saying today. So it's not something that he's just found that it's something that he's just trying to appeal to people's populist mentality. No, this is a man, like I say, that has been saying the same thing over and over. And he chose, rather than the fact, I mean, even the Conservative Party leadership race, I mean, it was split almost down the middle. 49.5% to 50.5. So 1% the difference whether Scheer got the power, and we all know how that came to play, dairy cartel. But either way, Maxime showed that even for the people that were supporters of the CPC, they were very much emboldened and getting excited about Maxime Bernier. So there's definitely a lot of residue as far as the Canadian minds of the masses that definitely resonates with them as far as what Maxime Bernier supports and what he promotes. So don't let the media deter you or try to convince you that Max has 2%, right? Hey, especially if you're a libertarian and you're watching this video, remember the Ron Paul moments of 2008, 2012, when they were saying that he's a nobody? Yeah. Why do you think libertarian has gone from a word was so obscure, maybe 1 in a million Canadians heard of, to now where it's almost espoused on a regular and continuing basis, even by the hacks in the media? Why? Because, good ideas, like Rick was saying a little bit earlier, doesn't matter where the ideas come from. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea, and it's something we should all rally behind and support.
You know, Lester B. Pearson is one of my favorite prime ministers. He, when he was in power, first of all, he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1957 for brokering the Suez Canal deal.
Nice.
You know, like Canada at that time had just this sterling reputation on the world scene. And he brought in the Canadian flag, the equalization program started. No, wait a minute. No, not equalization. He brought in the Canadian student loan program, the Canadian Health Act. He brought in our Canadian flag. He was prime minister when we had our centennial celebrations in 1967. That man could throw a party. And he was a true liberal, according to the books. And one of the most interesting things about him is the fact that he had 2 terms as prime minister, and they were both minority governments. And he accomplished so much working with everyone else. That's something that to really take pride in. You know, when you look back today, we can't even agree on the questions, never mind working together to collaborate on answers. And there's such a division going on, and people need to take their government back. And I hope Canadians really, really pay attention coming to October 21st, because this is an important one. And I don't really want to speculate on where we're going to be in 4 years with if liberals get in or conservatives, and I don't differentiate between liberals and conservatives, because both of them lack the principles to stand up for Canada. I mean, Trudeau we recognize as an outright, he skirts the line of sedition and treason. in what he does. And if I was member of parliament, I would really, I would introduce a private member's bill, or through the party, if Maxime Bernier and the rest of the guys and gals support it, a bill to change our oath for all sitting members of parliament. Right now, the oath basically is, I swear to defend and protect Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II. That's it. That's our oath. It says nothing about upholding our Constitution, protecting the sovereignty of Canada, and ensuring the safety and security of its people with equal application of the law. I mean, lawyers can cobble together the good wording, but there's the essence. And people that want to represent a riding in this country should be able to swear allegiance to an oath like that. And that's woefully missing. That's sadly missing from today's politics. And that's something that I would really support doing.
Yeah, that's actually great. You know what? It's funny because I was getting to the point where it's like we're getting to the point now where I probably should tie up this interview. And I was going to ask you, my last question was, any last thoughts? And actually, if you want to add or reiterate or even add something else into the equation, but I thought that was actually a pretty good way to surmise things. But like I say, if there's anything else that you want to add in regards to your particular riding or just in the general scope of how Canada is headed, and basically reiterate or double down on what you were saying in regards to that, and go ahead, Rick, because like I say, I don't want to tie up people for too long. We're probably getting to the point where we're it's finishing return. But yeah, I definitely want you to expand upon, because that's actually very important that we do make the country of Canada our central focus, right? And that's because that is something that we can show a form of unity behind, which is that our Constitution, what Canada represents as a country. And that's something I think that will help be more inclusive for Canadians and make it seem like it's something that we're rallying behind rather than something that's dividing us.
Absolutely. Canada is not a physical thing. You can go hiking through the bush looking for a border. You won't find it. A country, is an idea. It's a concept. It's held together by, common languages, currency, culture. And Canada needs to be defended periodically. We had to defend it in World War I, World War II, and right now we're at the crossroads again. But this is a much more insidious enemy, and people should wake up and pay attention. We're really lucky to have Maxime Bernier step up. He formed a party less than a year ago. We now have, and I think they're going to bring this out in the next day or two, 304 candidates, which is 90% of all ridings across the country filled, and will be able to participate in the national debates. So far, the news has ignored us to the best of their ability, but it's getting harder and harder to keep the lid on every day. And I think we'll see that as we move closer to the election. But it's no accident that this party was built so quickly. All the pundits, when Maxine stepped forward, said, no, you can't do it. But I'll tell you, I have never worked with a better group of people. And I'm talking about my own local riding association. Those people, they've got lives and work, and yet they still are working to the cause. And they're not doing it for self-interest. They're doing it for their families, for their youth, for their country. And all the people across the country that have stepped forward to be candidates, I'm proud to be part of that group. And I'm really appreciative to you, Bennett, for letting me come on today and speak. I think what you do is very valuable, and I like your podcasts.
Well, thanks, Rick. I genuinely appreciate not just you, but all the other people that have stepped up the plate and their efforts, because I know it's a sacrifice. Believe me, I understand the sacrifice you and everyone else is making to delve into this initiative, especially under the banner, because the media is going to attack you. They're going to try to attack your character. They're going to try to attack who you are as a person, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a nuisance. Fortunately, you're in a position, like I say, that you can handle this stuff. Some of the other new supporters or new candidates are going to probably be inundated with things that they never realized that they'd have to deal with a lot of life. But it's going to thicken their skin. And you know what? We do live in a world that it's not utopian, folks. You know, we have to deal with a lot of hard social economic situations, and it's okay. You know, it's fine. But these are the kind of experiences that are going to shape and define you as a person.
You're not over the target. You're not going to get any flack, Bennett.
Exactly. And like I say, those experiences are going to definitely shape and define you as a person, and it's going to make you more emboldened to do what you, or to continue to do what you do forward. And what you're seeing out there today, especially since the PPC has been formed under the leadership of Maxime Bernier, is just like you were alluding to, Rick. I'm so proud, man. I really am. I mean, we're all fallible human beings. I'm fallible. You're fallible. Well, sure. So there are going to be areas where it's like we don't agree with each other 100% on everything. But I'll tell you, if there's one initiative in this country that I'm so proud to be a part of, is all of those who stand for liberty. Sure, we might disagree on some nuances or some particular areas of policy, but at the end of the day, as long as our central focus, as long as the goal that we're all trying to unite behind is to create more freedom, more individual freedom, more personal responsibility, more respect, and more fairness for each other. I mean, how can you not be emboldened and ambitious to want to support that kind of initiative? I am, Rick is, and I'm sure even more and more Canadians after this interview, after this video is uploaded, are going to be more emboldened themselves because they realize that this is the place to be. I don't care who you are. And the beautiful thing about the People's Party of Canada is it's not just about conservatism. No, it's about, if you care about liberty, like I said, it doesn't matter if you come from the NDP and you're disenfranchised with some of those proponents of these collective endeavors, or if you're a classical liberal or a genuine staunch conservative or an independent or someone of the 30+% of Canadians that are apolitical and just don't want to delve into the fray anymore because they realize no one actually represents them. That's a huge tent that we can all gather together and unite underneath to show that we're a solid force to push back against the authoritarian collectivists that have been ruling the roost for far too long in this country. Anyways, Rick, yeah, sorry, man. But listen, thank you very much once again for having this conversation and for allowing me to have this interview with you. I'm here for you to support you, and not just you, but any other PPC candidate. So always feel free to reach out to me, and I'll help you in any way to help share and spread the message of liberty. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about us, but it's about that liberty that's going to be the basis, the foundation for our children and our grandchildren going forward.
Thank you, Bennett, for that. And I will reach out to you maybe closer to the election. Maybe there's something specific that comes up. We could have a short session or something, and I'll let you know how we're doing anyways.
Right on, Rick. Like I said, I wish you all the best, and I support you 100%. And thanks to all of those of you that got to watch this video. And we'll see you next time in my next interview. And rest assured, it's probably going to be another PPC candidate, because, yeah, I'm all about supporting those who support freedom and support liberty. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.